For many people, living next to or on the water is idyllic. However, it usually comes at a price. Waterfront properties are some of the most sought after and expensive in the world.
Although that is something new, especially for the Netherlands, because 30 years ago, 25 years ago, it was these houses near the water, and especially the old houseboats, it was for the poor. And definitely in the Netherlands, people who have money want to be in the dry. And it's only in those last decades that they see the value of that beautiful water locations, and that they take over these locations. So yeah, there's a premium, but I think the best premium is that if you think large-scale developments on water close to a city, is that the square meter price of a waterland, floodland, river, soil, bed, whatever, is less, even up to zero, if you compare to land. And that difference you can use to make your foundation work or your structure work financially.
Cohen and his team at Waterstudio are pioneers in floating architecture. Since the turn of the century, they've created hundreds of floating homes and a floating theatre, and are currently taking it to the next level with a floating city in the Maldives. Most of the technical challenges of living on the water have been overcome. And now, a growing number of people are looking to create waterborne communities in what has been dubbed Sea-Steading.
International waters are 12 miles out. That's a half-hour ferry ride from your coastal city. So that's shorter than my commute from San Francisco to Silicon Valley. Now, if you really want freedom, you're going to need to go 200 miles out, where no country has any claim. And that's 45% of the Earth's surface out there. And hopefully, Seasteads will have their own economies going. It'll be very similar to the American frontier. It'll start with pioneers who are devoted to the idea. Eventually, they're going to need a hardware store. They're going to need babysitters. Eventually, the first baby is going to be born in international waters. And these things will scale up. And pretty soon, you'll step from your land government onto a seastead the same way you step from the shore to a cruise ship. And cruise ships are self-governing floating societies, especially once they go far out to sea. And nobody changes their ideology or their minds, they simply choose something better. And I think Seasteads will be like that.
There are no plans to build a community far out into the oceans yet, but fledgling villages are beginning to take shape. In Panama, ocean builders have a proof-of-concept home called Seapod. It comes straight out of science fiction.
It kind of looks unlike anything people have seen before, but the closest thing people do recognize it with is like the Jetsons, the cartoon from the 60s and the 80s. We're kind of like that, but in the cartoon they were in the clouds, but we are just a few meters over the water, like about 2 to 3 meters over the water. We have this house that is almost the same shape as well, where it's rounded. In some ways it looks like an egg. It actually does help a lot with the aerodynamics, because it's easier for the wind to go around things, and it's not like a big sail compared to a flat wall. It makes it a lot harder to build the structure, because building something round with a different curve and radius on every house is hard, versus just having a straight wall that you put down, which is easy to make.
Constructing in places like Panama reduces the chance of the structure being overcome by high seas.
The fundamental challenge is waves. And you have to start where waves are relatively low. And fortunately, near the equator, most waves, the highest possible wave never gets higher than 5 meters, maybe 5.3 meters in some places. But this is an area larger than Asia.
The same part of the ocean uses a natural phenomenon that allows constructions to be more resilient.
There's an area around the equator of the world where you don't get hurricanes. It's just the way that the Coriolis effect of how all the forces of the Earth just come together within about, I think it's 700 or 800 kilometers of the equator. So we're just in this golden area.
When it comes to creating buildings that float, according to Cohen Olthuis, it's not about being revolutionary, but evolutionary.
It's not that we have to invent new technologies. We have to borrow that technology from other kind of industries and make it feasible. Because today it's possible to make a fantastic floating city in the middle of the ocean for oil reasons, to extract oil from the bottom, because they already do that. Only these installations cost $2 billion. Well, I can't spend $2 billion on a apartment building, can I? So it's that mix. You have to find existing technology, scale it down to the local needs, and bring it in that kind of economical feasible framework. In the sense that I think floating structures can be a little bit more expensive than normal buildings, but not more than 10 or 15%, because then it comes in this kind of area what we call freak architecture, and then it's only for the rich and for crazy.
And using already well-established technology can make floating homes no more expensive than those on land.
And the prototypes that are already floating in Panama are comparable in price to beachfront property. Lots of people pay a lot of money for ocean views. Now imagine if you had a 360-degree view above the water, and you have a 360-degree view below the water. This has already been built, and it's being tested right now and outfitted with luxury interiors. If we can keep this competitive with oceanfront property, we think people will at least stay on the CB&B, which is like an Airbnb on the ocean, the business that's being planned. And people can get used to the idea. They can go to the underwater room, they can realize I'm in an aquarium, but the fish are coming to look at me. And I think this will seduce people into the idea.
One of the biggest obstacles to floating buildings is not the technology, but the legal status of the place where it's to be built, in freshwater or saltwater.
If you're in most of the freshwater is in the city. In a city, it's more clear who owns the water, who controls the water, who can give you a permit. If we talk about saltwater, it's mostly sea or close to sea or ocean, in which it's almost impossible to predict who sets the rules. The fact that we do the floating city in the Maldives is because it's close to the capital city. It's within that kind of Greater Malay, which is capital city, Greater Malay legal framework. The fact that there's already a lot of logistics around there and that people are used to it. If we should have done that same city in the middle of the ocean, then same salt water, we would have big trouble, because then you have to make sure that there is, for instance, who is going to protect you? Do you have the same kind of army around you or navy around you? Is there a police system? Is there a kind of sewage system around? So all these things are part of it. People, and we do it ourselves too, architects, engineers, media, they focus too much on the technology, but it's also the whole framework of the legal and financial and social that makes a project feasible or not.
With such a new idea, few authorities have had to deal with building in open water, and with no set form of regulation, current rules have had to be adapted.
Since we arrived in Panama, we've been communicating with the local government in different levels, just to make sure that they know what we're doing, and we're trying to work as closely as possible with them to establish a way to coexist, and for us to be good with them and for them to be good with us, and just be really in a good place. So we've worked through all that those processes over the years, and we're basically being registered as a boat, so we can go pretty much wherever a boat goes in Panama. We have the full registration that a normal boat has. If we want to be there, we can put down an anchor and stay there. The nice thing about what we can do is we can be in rougher waters than most boats, so that gives us a little bit more variety in where we can put our floating home.
With the possibility of a semi-nomadic existence on the water come the practicalities of living.
We realized, okay, how are we going to get water? How are we going to get power? What are we going to do with waste? What are we going to do with getting supplies from land, for food, for Amazon deliveries, everything. So we had to go through and solve all these things one by one, and some problems we've solved completely, some problems we've solved partially, and some things are still a work in progress. So for power, we have solar panels. For this model, where we have for the support, on one of those we have solar panels, and then on the second one we have solar panels, and then on the third arm we have a backup generator. We've only had to flip the backup generator on once in the last, I guess, 9 months now. So we've produced enough solar every day to be able to power us through even days where times where we had 2-3 days of cloud where we didn't have very much solar power being generated. And the roof is actually, it looks flat, but it's actually angled down and in towards the center by about 1 degree. And it's not very much, but it's enough that when it rains, we collect all that water. And that's a huge water collection surface. And we're in the tropics, so sometimes you have some pretty strong rainfall. And when it rains for 10 or maybe 5 or 10 minutes, depending on how heavy the rain is, we can fill our water tanks completely in just a very short period of time. And that will last me for about 2 to 3 weeks on just one rainfall, short rainfall. We have projects we want to do for growing food hydroponically in the house, and that we're looking at designs that would actually integrate that right into the walls. So your walls, interior walls, become a place where you grow food, and there's actually a lot of, you'll produce much more than you need, but we're trying to make it in a way that it's going to be easy enough for the average person to use.
The goal of self-sustainable living on the water is sometimes difficult for people to comprehend. It was certainly the case for those building the Seapods in Panama.
We're in a small town, 2-hour drive from the main city of Panama. Nothing like this has ever been done before, so trying to get people to understand what we're doing, tell them how to do a specific job to build this, and then get them to actually do it the correct way, and for them to see the big picture of how their part fits in with the whole, has been really challenging. It added probably 70% to our construction time or build time. But it would have been, no matter where we did this, it would have been hard. Now that the first one has been done, and we can say, come to look at what we already have and see that it's been done, see how it's been done, understand it, know what we're actually building, the next one's going to be so much faster, so much easier.
Although the seas around the equator may not have huge waves to contend with, it is salt water and has a detrimental effect. Exposed metals tend to rust. One answer uses Mother Nature to turn the underwater part of the floating home into a coral reef.
The challenge of running an anode through the steel in order to attract calcium carbonate and turn it into a seashell appears to be working very well so far. The last remaining engineering challenge is the water-air interface, where the waves move up and down. That slowly rusts. And there are lots of methods for lowering the seastead temporarily or raising the seastead temporarily and painting that. But we want seasteads to remain at sea for centuries.
Whether the floating communities Joe talks about will last centuries is tough to tell. But what the architects and builders of floating homes do realize is that these structures need to be both sustainable and long-lasting if they are to compete with land-based property.
It starts as an elite product, and that I don't think it's really bad. I think we need rich people to innovate, to pay for innovation. But now we have to make the step to affordability. And affordability also doesn't mean that everybody can get a mortgage to buy and build a house, because also on land, not everybody owns a house. But we should now, and that we're trying to do, is pursue institutional investors to build floating affordable apartment buildings and start renting them out for an affordable rent. And that's the process. And we do that to explain to those and to show those investors that their return on investment is different, but better than on land. And that has to do with the fact that it's very difficult to find a location in a city to build a apartment building, because look at London, New York, full. But these kind of investors, if they can get their hands on a piece of water, only if it's for 15 years or 20 years, get their rendement, get their investment back in these 20 years and then sell or reuse that same structure somewhere else in the city's water, then you get a complete different financial system. So that's where we try to make it more affordable.
Even though Cohen and his team have been designing floating buildings for over 2 decades, they are still relatively rare worldwide. The demand for properties by the water has never been greater, so we will have to see if people are willing to take that step off dry land and inhabit the oceans.
Remember to hit the subscribe button and ring that bell to stay updated with our latest content. And while you're here, why not check out another one of our exciting videos? Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.